I had my keys in one hand and a stack of junk mail in the other. Bills, a pizza coupon, something addressed to current resident, like it knew exactly how little a person could be. I was halfway to my mailbox when she stepped out from the shadow of the stairwell and stopped me like a hand on the chest. "Don't," she said. I froze. The metal boxes were lined up along the wall, every name on them a small-town roll call. Everyone saw everyone. Everyone remembered. Her hair was damp from the drizzle outside, curls stuck to her cheek. Her hoodie was too thin for the cold. She had that look I'd learned to recognize on calls, the one people wore when they'd already made a decision but needed someone else to witness it. "Why do you keep doing it?" she asked. "Doing what?" "You know." Her eyes flicked past my shoulder to the elevator. The door I always pretended not to hear opening. The hallway I always chose not to walk down when her light was on. The turning around, the fake phone calls, the, "Oh, I forgot something" routine. My throat tried to close like a fist. "I'm just busy," I said. She laughed, but it didn't have humor in it. "Busy doesn't make you walk the long way around the building to take out one trash bag." I didn't answer. She stepped closer. In the fluorescent lobby light, I could see the fine lines of exhaustion around her mouth. It was the same exhaustion I saw in family members who'd sat in waiting rooms too long. The same that lived in me. "Say it," she demanded. "Why?" The wind shoved against the door again, rattling the glass. I swallowed, and the truth came out wearing only part of its skin. "Because looking at you hurts." Her face tightened like she'd been struck, then steadied. "Good," she said, voice low. "Then we're finally talking." I felt the paper in my hand crumple under my grip. "This isn't—" "It is." She planted herself between me and the exit like she'd been practicing. "You don't get to keep dodging me in my own building." "Not after months of acting like my shadow is contagious." I stared at the mailboxes, at the little nameplates. L. Markovich. 2 doors down. Every day the same letters. Every day the same punch. She followed my gaze and said, "Explain it. Here. Now." A car passed outside, tires hissing on wet pavement. The lobby smelled faintly of damp wool and someone's burnt toast. I could have lied better. I'd lied professionally, in small ways. It'll be okay, when it might not. Help is on the way, when traffic was snarled. I knew how to cushion pain, but her pain didn't want cushioning. It wanted a blade. I met her eyes. "I knew your brother," I said. Her pupils sharpened. "No, you didn't." I nodded anyway because my body was tired of carrying it alone. "Yes, I did." She didn't move. Her hands stayed loose at her sides, but her shoulders went rigid like a door locking. "You're a paramedic," she said as if the word tasted bitter. "I've seen the uniform, the boots, the way you always check your pockets like you're counting for something." The lobby light flickered once. I flinched like it was a siren. She took a slow breath. "You were there," she said. I didn't answer fast enough. Her mouth twisted. "Of course you were." The wind hit the building hard, and somewhere above us a loose vent cover clattered like a warning. "Tell me," she said. "Start talking." My heart stuttered, then found a rhythm it didn't deserve. "Not here," I tried. "Here," she insisted. "If I let you walk away again, you'll do the stairs thing and disappear for another week. I'm done being polite." Her voice cracked at the end. Just a hairline fracture, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. I let out a breath that tasted like metal. His name was Theo. She blinked like she hadn't expected me to say it right. "My brother," she whispered, and the word was a bruise. The silence between us swelled, thick and crowded. The elevator dinged somewhere upstairs, cheerful and wrong. I could feel the memory rising, that cold, slick thing, the way the river had sounded that day. Not water, not really, more like something tearing. "You were the last one with him," she said, not a question. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. "Yes." Her jaw flexed. So why are you hiding from me like I'm the one who did something? Because I could still feel his hand. Because I could still hear my own voice in his ear, saying things I hadn't been sure of. Because watching you hurts in a way that makes my ribs feel borrowed. But I didn't say that part. I couldn't. Not yet. I only said, because I don't know what you see when you look at me. She stepped closer until the space between us was as thin as paper. I see someone who runs, she said, and I'm tired of chasing ghosts. Her eyes shone, but she didn't let a tear fall. That was the thing about her. Broken on the outside, yes, but inside, something held. I tried to look away. She reached out and caught my wrist, fingers cold from the weather. No, she said, you don't get to turn your head and make me beg for the truth. The contact lit every nerve in me. Not sweet, not romantic, just raw. I can't, I started. You can. Her grip tightened. I'm standing right here. I looked at her hand on my wrist and felt my own pulse kicking under her fingers like an animal trapped. It hurts to look at you, I said again, softer, as if repeating it could make it mean something safer. She held my gaze like a dare. Then look anyway, she said, and my world narrowed to her face and the sound of rain tapping the lobby window like impatient fingers, and I realized I'd been out of excuses for a long time. The long way around. After she let me go, I did what I always did. I escaped. Not past her, not through the door. I took the corner like it was a lifeboat and walked down the hallway toward the laundry room, mail still unopened, my heart hammering like I'd just run a code. I could feel her watching my back. I could feel it like heat. Tonight, she called after me. I stopped, hand on the laundry room knob. 7, she said. My door. If you're not there, I'm coming to yours. The threat wasn't violent. It was worse. It was certain. I didn't turn around. Turning around meant seeing her face again, and seeing her face meant the river again, and the river meant Theo. Fine, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone braver. I went inside the laundry room and stared at the coin machine like it could tell me how to unmake a past. The fluorescent light buzzed. The dryer vents smelled like cheap detergent and warm lint. Normal things, safe things. But the memory slid in anyway, because memories don't need permission. Theo on the riverbank, shirt soaked, eyes wide and impossibly young, his lips turning that wrong color, the way the wind had ripped at our jackets like it wanted us to join him, and the detail that always cut deepest, the plastic festival wristband still clinging to his wrist, neon orange against pale skin, stamped with Pine Bend Riverfest like the world was mocking him with a date he wouldn't reach. I'd peeled it off carefully while my partner counted compressions. My gloves were slick, and the wristband snapped back against my knuckle with a tiny, stupid sting. A small pain inside a catastrophe. I'd kept the wristband. I told myself it was evidence, a detail for the report, a thing to remember. But the truth was uglier. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. And now Lena Markovich lived 2 doors down, and every time I saw her at the mailboxes or in the parking lot, my lungs forgot how to work. Because seeing her meant knowing I'd carried something that belonged to her for years, and I'd never had the courage to give it back. Not when she was crying in the hospital hallway. Not when she was screaming at the river. Not when she moved into Maple Court and pretended not to recognize my face. Not when I started taking the stairs. Not even when she blocked my path and demanded the truth. I leaned my forehead against the cold washer lid and closed my eyes. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A department group message, internal review notice, attendance mandatory. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might vomit, because the river wasn't done with me yet. Tea, rules, and the space between. At 6:59, I stood outside Lena's door with my hands empty. No flowers, no apologies wrapped in ribbon, nothing theatrical. Just me, in a clean hoodie, boots scuffed from a shift, standing in a hallway that smelled like someone's curry and old carpet. The building was quiet in that dusk way when people turned on lamps and tried to pretend loneliness was a choice. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been waiting with her hand on the knob. She looked different inside her apartment. Softer, not in her bones, but in the light. A single lamp burned on a side table. A mug sat ready on the counter. There were no pictures on the walls, like she didn't trust images not to leave. "Come in," she said. I stepped over the threshold and felt like I was trespassing on a grief I'd helped build. She didn't offer the couch. She didn't offer comfort. She pointed to the kitchen table. We sat like two people about to negotiate a ceasefire. For a moment, all we could hear was the rain tapping the window and the fridge humming like a reluctant witness. She slid a mug toward me. Tea. Black. No sugar packet. "Tell me," she said. "About Theo?" I asked, though we both knew the answer. "Yes." Her fingers curled around her own mug, knuckles pale. "Start with the part you think you're allowed to say." I stared at the steam rising between us. It curled like a question mark. "I was on River Unit 2 that day," I said. "We got the call at 3:12. Icebreak near the old footbridge. Reports of a male in the water." Her eyes flinched at the clinical tone, but she didn't stop me. "We were there in 7 minutes," I continued. "Your brother, he'd already been pulled out by 2 guys from the bait shop. They did what they could. They kept him breathing as best as they knew." Lena's jaw tightened. "They blamed themselves." "They shouldn't," I said, and then stopped because she'd told me not to moralize, because the words sounded like comfort, and comfort felt like theft. She waited. I swallowed. He was conscious for a minute. Not much, but enough to speak. Her eyes snapped to mine. He talked. The question hit me like a punch. Of course she'd asked. Of course nobody had answered. I looked down at my hands. My fingers twitched like they wanted to open something that wasn't there. "Yes," I said. The room seemed to tilt. "What did he say?" she whispered. I hesitated. The part I'd been carrying pressed against my ribs, heavy as wet clothes. Lena's voice sharpened. "Don't you dare edit him." I flinched. "He said your name." Her breath caught, silent but violent. He said, "Lena," I went on, forcing the memory into the air like smoke. And then he said, "Tell her I didn't." My throat closed. "Didn't what?" Lena asked, eyes bright now, not with tears, but with something more dangerous. Hope. Fury. Need. I shook my head, ashamed of the gap. I couldn't hear the rest. The helicopter was coming in. The wind was... "Stop," she cut in. "Stop trying to soften it. What did you hear?" I stared at her. I heard him say, "Tell her I didn't mean..." And then he started coughing. Pink foam. Hypothermia and water in his lungs. He tried again. Lena's hands clenched around the mug like it was the only thing holding her together. I took a breath that scraped. "He grabbed my sleeve," I said. "Harder than you'd think for someone that cold. And he said, tell her, the dog." Her face crumpled for 1 second, then slammed back into place. "Milo," she said, voice cracking on the name. I nodded. "He was worried about the dog," she said, and the sound that came out was half laugh, half sob. "He was worried about you," I said, "but he didn't say it like a movie. It was practical, like a list." Lena looked down at her tea. The surface trembled slightly from her shaking hands. "You're telling me this now," she said, voice flat. "After all this time." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't have the right. Because I was afraid you'd spit in my face. Because I was afraid you wouldn't. Because I can't look at you without it hurting and still pretend I'm fine. But I didn't say that. I chose a smaller truth. Because I thought you'd hate me," I said. Lena's gaze lifted, steady and exhausted. "I already did," she said. "For a while." The words landed and stayed. I nodded, accepting it like a sentence. "That's fair." She stared at me a long time. "It wasn't you," she said finally. The reflex in me tried to grab it, tried to use it as a life raft. I didn't let myself. I was there, I said. That counts for something. It counts, she agreed. Just not the way you think. The room held its breath. Then she said, very quietly, I recognized you the day you moved in. My head snapped up. What? She didn't flinch. Your face, your voice, your hands. I watched you write your name on the lease clipboard in the lobby. I saw the way you held the pen like it was a tool, not a toy. Cold slid down my spine. You never said anything, I whispered. I didn't move here by accident, she said. The air between us went sharp. You moved here, I repeated stupidly. Lena's eyes didn't waver. Yes. Why? My voice cracked on the edge of anger and fear. To punish me? No. She shook her head once. To understand how to keep living. My stomach twisted. That's not my job. I know, she said. But you were the last person who heard him. You were the last person who touched him while he was still here. And everyone else, they talked like he was a case number. Her mug clinked softly against the table as she set it down. I wanted to see if you carried him too, she said, because I couldn't stand being the only one. The honesty in her voice hurt more than any accusation. You should have asked, I said. I did, she replied. In the hospital. You walked past me like I was air. I stared at her, the memory flickering. The hallway, the fluorescent lights, my partner guiding me toward the supply closet, someone sobbing behind me. I didn't, I started. You did, she said, not cruelly, just factual. And then you kept doing it, every day, turning away. My throat tightened. Because looking at you hurts, I admitted, and it sounded less like an excuse and more like a confession. Lena's eyes softened a fraction. Good, she said again. Now we're both in it. I swallowed. There's more, I said. Her gaze sharpened. I knew there would be. My hand moved before my courage did. I reached into my hoodie pocket and pulled out my phone, opened the department message, slid it across the table. Internal review notice. Attendance mandatory. River incident reassessment. Lena read it. Her face didn't change much, but something in her spine straightened. They're reopening it, she said. Yeah. Why? I shook my head. A reporter got hold of the bystander video. It's been circulating. People are talking. I tasted bile. And talking turns into blame. Lena's eyes hardened. They're going to hang it on you. Maybe. I stared at the table. It's easier than admitting the river is just a thief. Silence again. The rain outside thickened, heavier now, like it had decided to commit. Lena stood abruptly, went to a drawer, and pulled out a folded envelope. She came back and placed it in front of me. What's this? I asked. A copy of Theo's autopsy report, she said, and the case file request I made last year. And the letter I never sent to the city attorney. My hands went cold. You did all this? Her mouth tightened. You think I moved in next to you just to stare at your door? I looked at the envelope, then at her. Why are you showing me? Because I'm not letting them rewrite what happened, she said. Not for you, for him. I swallowed hard. You don't owe me that. Lena's voice went flat as winter. I'm not doing it for you. And somehow, that was the kindest thing she could have said. The thing I kept. 2 nights later, she knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. Habit tried to take over. Turn off the light, hold my breath, wait until the footsteps left. But I was tired of being a coward with good intentions. I opened the door. Lena stood there with a paper bag in one hand and a thermos in the other. The hallway light caught the damp on her hair again. It was always damp lately. The weather in Pine Bend didn't do sunshine in February. It did gray. It did cold drizzle. It did lessons. I made soup, she said. I blinked. Why? She lifted one shoulder. Because you look like you're living on coffee and guilt. I let her in. She didn't hug me. She didn't touch me. She set the bag on my counter like it was normal to bring soup to the person who'd held your brother's last words hostage. I watched her move through my kitchen, pragmatic and quiet. She found a bowl without asking. She poured soup without ceremony. "I'm not staying," she said. "Okay," I replied and felt oddly disappointed. She turned to face me. "There's a line," she said, "between leaning on someone and drowning them." I nodded slowly. "Yes." Her eyes held mine. "And there's another line," she added, voice rougher, "between what we feel and what we're allowed to do about it." My chest tightened. I didn't pretend I didn't understand. "I don't want to hurt you," I said. Lena gave a short, humorless laugh. "That ship left the dock." The words stung, but she didn't say them to cut me. She said them to stop us from lying. I took a breath. "Then what do you want?" She looked down at the soup, then back up. "I want the truth," she said. "All of it, including whatever you've been protecting me from." My mouth went dry. I turned away, walked to the small hallway closet and opened the top shelf where I kept things I didn't want to see. Extra gloves, old department patches, a sealed bag with a plastic wristband inside. My hand shook as I pulled it down. When I came back, Lena's eyes were on the bag like it was radioactive. "What is that?" she asked, voice barely there. I set it on the counter between us. Slowly, I unsealed it and slid the wristband out. Neon orange, cheap plastic, faded ink, Pine Bend Riverfest. Lena's breath left her in one silent rush. "You kept it," she whispered. "I didn't mean to," I said, and hated myself for how weak it sounded. At first it was evidence. I told myself it mattered for the report. Then it became, I don't know, a punishment. Lena reached for it, stopped halfway, fingers trembling. Like touching it might make the river come back. "Why didn't you give it to me?" she asked. "Because I didn't want to see your face collapse. Because I didn't want to hear you say my name like a curse. Because I wasn't sure I deserved to be part of your grief. Because it's painful to watch you stand in the same world as me and still breathe." I forced myself to say the truth I'd been dodging. "Because you asked me that day," I said, "in the hospital. You asked if he said anything." Lena's eyes sharpened. "And you said no." I nodded. My throat burned. I said no. Her face didn't explode into anger. It went still, like ice forming. "Why?" she asked, voice deadly calm. I swallowed. "Because he told me something else," I said. "Something I didn't think I had the right to deliver." Lena's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Say it." I took a breath that hurt. "He asked me to promise," I said. Her eyes didn't blink. "Promise what?" "That I wouldn't let you blame yourself," I said. He thought you'd blame yourself for letting him go out there, for not answering your phone, for whatever your brain would invent." Lena's mouth opened slightly like she'd been struck. "He said," I continued, voice shaking now, he said, "Tell her. It's not her fault. Don't let her do that." And I promised him. Lena stared at me, frozen. "And then you didn't tell me," she said, voice thin. "I didn't," I admitted, "because the moment I told you, it would become your burden again. You'd hear his words and still twist them into a knife, and I was afraid my promise would fail." Lena's eyes glistened. One tear finally escaped, slid down her cheek without permission. "You don't get to decide what breaks me," she said, voice trembling. "I decide." "I know," I whispered. She wiped the tear away hard, almost angry at it. "And you made a promise to my brother," she said. "Then you made another promise to yourself that you'd carry it alone." I didn't deny it. Lena took a shaky breath and reached out. This time, she did touch the wristband. Her fingers closed around it, gentle as prayer, fierce as survival. For a long moment, she just held it. Then she looked up at me. "I'm going to the review," she said. My stomach dropped. Lena. No. Her voice was steel. They're not turning Theo into a talking point, and they're not turning you into a scapegoat to make the town feel tidy. You don't owe. I already told you, she cut in. I'm not doing this for you. She stepped back toward the door, thermos already in hand like she'd planned her exit. Before she left, she paused and said very quietly, "And for the record, you don't have to keep punishing yourself to honor him." Then she was gone, leaving soup on my counter and a space in my apartment that felt both terrifying and alive. I stared at the closed door until the hallway light dimmed. The river wasn't done, but neither was she. The third hand on the story. The county administration building smelled like old coffee and damp coats. The hallway was crowded with people who pretended they weren't staring, because Pine Bend loved a spectacle the way it loved Friday night football. Quietly, religiously. I stood in my department uniform anyway, because hiding had never saved me. Across the hall, a man with a camera adjusted his lens. A woman with a notepad whispered into her phone. Their eyes kept flicking toward me like I was a headline waiting to happen. Paramedic under fire after river death. I could already hear the phrasing, the way it would make strangers feel righteous. My captain approached, expression tight. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said truthfully. He nodded like he respected that more than a lie. "Good. Honesty plays better in there." "Plays," I muttered, bitter. He sighed. "Just tell the truth. Let the facts do their job." Facts didn't do jobs. People did. And people got tired. The door to the hearing room opened. A clerk called my name. I stepped forward and my legs felt like borrowed wood. Inside, the room was too warm. The chairs were hard. The fluorescent lights made everyone look sick. At the front table sat a city attorney, expression polite in the way that meant he'd already chosen his outcome. Beside him, a representative from the State Safety Board shuffled papers like cards. I took my seat. The chair scraped, loud as a confession. The first questions were procedural, technical, designed to lull. Times, distances, protocol. I answered steadily because I'd done it before. Reports were my second language. Then the attorney leaned forward and said, "At any point, did you deviate from established rescue guidelines?" "No." "Did you make any promises to the victim that affected your clinical judgment?" My heart stuttered. "No," I said, because the promise hadn't affected my hands. It had only affected my soul. He watched me closely. "Were you aware," he asked, "that there are allegations your response time was delayed due to miscommunication on scene?" I clenched my jaw. "We arrived in 7 minutes. Logged." He smiled faintly. "And yet, video suggests—" The cameraman in the back shifted. The reporter's pen moved faster. My palms went damp. Then the door at the back opened quietly. Lena walked in. No dramatic entrance, no storm. Just her in a dark coat, hair tucked behind her ears, face pale from the cold outside. She took a seat near the back without looking at anyone, but I felt her presence like a steady hand on my spine. The attorney glanced at her, then back at me. "Mr. Shaw," he said, using my name like a hook, "did the victim say anything of significance while in your care?" My throat tightened. I heard Theo's voice in my head, thin and stubborn. "Tell her. The dog." I heard Lena in my kitchen. "Don't you dare edit him." The room waited. The attorney's tone sharpened. "Answer the question." I swallowed. "Yes," I said. A ripple went through the audience, small but electric. The attorney blinked, surprised. "And what did he say?" My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I looked toward the back of the room. Lena met my gaze. She didn't nod. She didn't soften. She simply looked at me like a person insisting on truth. It was almost unbearable. It hurt to look at her, but I did it anyway. "He said," I began, voice rough, "he said he didn't want her to blame herself." The attorney frowned. Who is her? I kept my eyes on Lena. His sister, I said. Lena Markovich. The room turned, heads pivoting toward her like weather vanes. Lena didn't flinch. The attorney tried to regain control. And did you tell Miss Markovich this information at the time? My mouth went dry. No, I admitted. A murmur, a shift. The reporter's pen scratched faster. The attorney's eyes gleamed, sensing blood. So, you withheld information from next of kin. I could have fought. I could have argued nuance and trauma and timing. Instead, I told the truth. Yes, I said. I did. The city attorney leaned back, satisfied, like he'd just found his angle. Then Lena stood. Her chair scraped loudly across the floor, and the sound snapped the room's attention to her like a whip. Excuse me, she said, voice steady. Are you going to let me speak, or are you only interested in using my brother as leverage? The room went silent in a way that felt physical. The state board representative blinked. Ma'am, this is my brother, Lena cut in. Her hands were at her sides, but her posture was unbreakable. You're talking about protocol like it's a religion. Protocol didn't pull Theo out of the water. People did. The attorney's smile tightened. Ms. Markovich, with respect, she echoed, and her voice sharpened. You can't respect someone and turn their death into a strategy at the same time. The board representative cleared his throat. Ms. Markovich, you may give a statement if it's relevant. It's relevant, she said simply. She looked at me for half a second, then faced the panel. Theo went onto that ice because the warning sign by the footbridge had been knocked down for weeks. I called Public Works twice about it. I have records. Nobody fixed it. The attorney's head snapped up. That's not... Lena kept going. And those two men from the bait shop had him out before the rescue unit arrived. They did CPR. They kept him alive long enough for a paramedic to hear his last words. She didn't look at me when she said it, and somehow that made it cleaner. The panel shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Lena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Here, she said, walking forward, placing it on the table. Call logs, photos of the missing sign, the written complaint I filed, and a copy of the bystander video you're using. The attorney stared at the folder like it was a snake. Lena's voice softened slightly, not into sweetness, but into something like clarity. If you want to review something, review the truth, she said. My brother died in a chain of failures that started long before an ambulance was dispatched. The board representative took the folder slowly. Ms. Markovich, he said, voice cautious, are you alleging negligence by the city? I'm alleging reality, she replied, and I'm asking you not to put it on one person because it's easier to swallow. The room held its breath. The attorney opened his mouth and closed it, recalculating. Lena turned slightly, eyes finding me again. I felt the old shame surge, hot and sharp. I expected her to look at me like a culprit. Instead, she looked at me like someone who'd made a choice. The board representative cleared his throat. Mr. Shaw, he said, please continue. What else did the victim say? My voice shook, but I didn't run from it. He said, tell Lena it's not her fault. I paused, hearing the wind, the helicopter, the wet slap of gloves. And he said, tell her. The dog. Lena's mouth tightened. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't break. I forced myself to add the part that mattered most, the part I'd kept like contraband. And he made me promise, I said, loud enough for everyone, including the reporters. He made me promise I wouldn't let her blame herself. The attorney leaned forward, smelling scandal. And did you keep that promise? I looked at Lena. I wanted to look away. I didn't. No, I said. Not the way he meant. I tried to carry it for her instead of giving it to her. That was my mistake. Lena's breath hitched, almost silent. The panel sat back, startled by the lack of defensiveness. The board representative's voice gentled. "Thank you," he said quietly. The hearing didn't end with applause. It ended with paperwork. With the panel requesting additional records, with the attorney's plan collapsing into something messier, with the reporters scrambling to rewrite their angles. But something had shifted. The story was no longer simple enough to hang on my neck. And Lena had put her body between me and the easy lie, not because she loved me, but because she loved the truth more than she loved being comfortable. That kind of loyalty didn't sparkle. It burned clean. Parking lot dusk. Outside, the sky had turned the color of wet concrete. The drizzle had thinned into a cold mist that beaded on coats and eyelashes. The wind came off the river like it remembered. People spilled out of the building in clusters, whispering. A reporter tried to approach me. My captain stepped in front of her, polite but firm. I walked past it all like I was moving through water. Lena stood by the curb, hands in her coat pockets. She looked smaller outside, not weaker, just human. I stopped a few feet away, unsure if I was allowed closer. "You didn't have to do that," I said. She snorted softly. "You're still stuck on owing." "I'm stuck on you," I admitted before I could stop myself. Her eyes lifted to mine. The moment stretched, thin and dangerous. "I don't want this to turn into something ugly," Lena said, voice low. "I didn't do what I did in there so you'd feel like you have to." "I know," I said quickly. "I know." She studied my face like she was checking for manipulation. She'd earned that caution. "I meant what I said," she added. "There are lines." "Yes. And we're not crossing them just because the room was emotional," she said. I nodded. Relief and disappointment tangled together in my chest. Then Lena reached into her pocket and pulled out the neon orange wristband. She held it out to me. I stared at it, stunned. "That's his." "It's ours," she corrected softly. "And you kept it long enough." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I know," she said, and it wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was recognition. She slipped the wristband back into her pocket, safe now, claimed. We stood there, the wind moving around us like an impatient animal. "I should go," she said. "Okay," I replied, even though my body wanted to say anything else. She took one step, then paused. "You're going to be tempted," she said quietly. "Tempted to what?" "To disappear again," she said. "To take the stairs. To turn your face away. Because that's your ritual." I swallowed. "Yeah." Lena looked at me a long moment. "Don't," she said. It wasn't a command, it was a request, the kind that cost something. I nodded. She turned, started walking toward the parking lot where her car sat under a bare tree, branches clawing at the sky. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back. "And for the record," she called softly, "seeing you hurts too." The words hit me like cold water. Then she added, almost under her breath, "But maybe it's not the kind of hurt that kills." And the dusk swallowed her, leaving me standing under a street lamp that flickered like it was deciding whether to stay on. Quiet, not easy. That night, I found myself outside her door with a thermos in my hand. Not soup this time, just tea. Something hot. Something ordinary. Something that didn't try to buy forgiveness. I knocked once. There was a pause. Then the door opened a crack. Lena looked at the thermos, then at my face. "Boundaries," she warned. "Tea," I offered. "No speeches." She stared at me for a beat, then opened the door wider. "Put it on the mat," she said. I set it down like an offering to a cautious animal. She didn't invite me in. She didn't touch my hand. She didn't smile. But she didn't close the door immediately either. We stood there in the thin slice of hallway light, breathing the same air. "It still hurts to look at you," I admitted quietly. Lena's eyes softened just a fraction. "Then don't look at me like I'm a punishment," she said. Look at me like I'm a person. I swallowed hard. I'm trying. I know, she replied. She picked up the thermos and held it, fingers tightening around the warmth. Good night, she said. Good night, I echoed. The door clicked shut, gentle but final. I stood there for a moment, listening to the building settle. Somewhere, a neighbor's TV murmured. Somewhere, the wind pressed its face to the windows. I walked back to my apartment without taking the long way around. Inside, I sat at my kitchen table and let myself breathe. Not relief like a victory, not joy like a movie. Just a small, quiet permission to exist without bracing for impact every second. Outside, the rain started again, soft at first, then steadier, washing the sidewalks clean in slow, stubborn strokes. I thought of Theo's last list, his practical love, his faith that a promise could hold, and I thought of Lena, standing up in that room, refusing an easy lie. The pain was still there, but it had changed shape. Looking at her still hurt, yes, but now it hurt the way a muscle aches after it finally starts working again.